Hello, friends and family. This is Aya reporting live from my personal sauna. Well, it's more like a little tent thing, but it's got infrared panels and it's nice and warm. And today I'm speaking about the recent men's retreat that I just went on. Helped to co-facilitate with the Expansive Man. Expansive Man is lead-headed by Vern Petty, and co-facilitators included Brian Carew, Benoit, Brett Mentor, Afif Khanzada, and a beautiful group of 28 men. We were in the Saktin territory, up the Inshucks, past Pemberton, the land of my elder Mumsy. And we were there for 4 days, 4 transformational days. We had full days, martial arts, breath work, qigong and other movement practices integrated with yoga and dance, fully catered by the wonderful Scott. Sweat lodge, fire ceremony, dyads, shadow work. There's a long list of practices that allowed this container to be so powerful. And I'm coming away from this retreat with strength and a power that's not rooted in my personal power. Though that was amplified, it's a power rooted in brotherhood and a shared purpose to stand together, to stand for the new earth that we are creating, to stand in honor of ourselves so that we can best show up for the women in our life, for the children we may one day have, for the relationships that we have and are cultivating, for our community, for those in need, and for the earth. And I've done a lot of retreat work. I've done a lot of, let's call it spiritual work, inner work. But exclusive male containers is something that I've been working with more and more and recognized as important. It's just different. It's different when there's men and women in the container. It's different when there's just women in the container. And what I find in these containers of all men is some similar themes. A lot of men, when they come to these containers, reveal that they have trouble making deep connections, meaningful connections with other men. Now, these bonds are so important. These brotherhood bonds are so important. And when a man doesn't have these in his life, there's a piece missing. And for me, I've recognized me historically. And the more that I integrate men's circles and a closer brotherhood, I see many areas of my life growing which had been stagnant. There's a certain catalyst when iron sharpens iron, when two and can hold each other to their highest. So this is a very beautiful and therapeutic relationship. And many of the relationships that we have in our life don't hold that standard. So when we come together in men's work and on these retreats, we set the container. We set a standard in the container. We set a series of general rules and guidelines that help to hold the space so that we can be in integrity with ourselves, that allows for clear instructions of how men are expected to act, so that there's a higher degree of harmony so that we can do our work. It's the same when you go into any high-level sport or any high-level company. There's a code and ethos. There's something that pulls the structure together so that the game can be played at a very high level. One of the first things we did on the first day was actually to do a series of martial arts and boxing and other martial activities. And within the confines of a certain set of rules, such as no biting and kicking in the nuts and the things you in a fight if you actually, don't truly want to harm the person, but you want to compete. You want to have a good level of aggression. You want to fire yourself up and see who's the better man of that match. And there's a humility that comes. There's a humbleness that comes when you get punched in the face. And if you don't fight at all, like some of the men who had never fought, there's a lot more resistance to fight, to stepping in there. And one of the revelations for one of those men, which sounded pretty resonant when he shared it, was that it's harder to be in anticipation than actually in the fight. Because when you're actually there, stepping in, there's a whole bunch of genes that get activated. Your mind is present. And it's the mind before that can cause some anxiety, some anticipation, maybe some scaredness about one's ego. And that can all fall away. That can all fall away in the pursuit of the goal, in pursuit of making oneself better. Many men have this fear of fighting. And until I went into martial arts training, I had this fear, and I didn't realize I had it because it was subconscious, but it was dictating the way that I showed up in certain groups. Because if ever something were to break out, I knew on some level that I didn't know what to do. There was no confidence there, and this affected how boldly I could stand in my truth. And by no means am I a high-level fighter at this point in my life and career. However, I can show up as myself because I can see that shadow now. And in any kind of circumstance where I want to stand boldly, it's not necessarily just about fighting. It's about standing in one's truth. And there's something that when an individual stands up in that way, in the way of fighting, in the way of being a warrior, it can translate to simply showing up for the fight, metaphorically, showing up for our truth, showing up for the arguments and the things that we want to offer our insights on, our ideas on, that may run contrary to what certain authorities or certain figures in our society may be sharing. And it's so powerful to see a man who has not fought tap into his primal energy, something we're very disconnected to because of one thing or another: technology, the jobs, the glyphosate and the other pesticides in our food that lower our testosterone and throw off our hormones, among many other adulterants in the food, many other chemicals that are throwing off our hormones. So I see men coming to rise and reclaim what is their birthright, to stand strong. And when that man comes into his empowerment, there's something that happens with his mind and his capacity to move towards his goals. I remember when I started getting into martial arts, when I was doing my business, like I took a period off and then I started doing them again as I was owning or operating my business, and my entire mindset started to shift. Just as in fighting, there's a process of problem solving that happens in the mind, in the body, of how to best approach a fight, how to look at an opponent and find his strengths and weaknesses, how to create a strategy, and how to embody your actions, offensive, defensively, how to move, how to get caught in tricky places and get out of them, how to fail and get back up. These are all transferable mind programs that were being integrated into the mind and the body as I began to do martial arts, and they transferred into the way that I could approach my business and my life. So if an individual has never fought and never been put in these scenarios, and all of a sudden he empowers himself, there's a whole series of mind programs that become available and his confidence rises. His confidence rises, and the confidence, when it's not there, when self-esteem is low, blocks the mind from seeing or knowing that one can follow one's goals and they will be successful. Because one has to get used to this trying and failing, which go hand in hand. One has to get used to what it takes to be a warrior, what it takes to work for something, and to go against that resistance, and to work with the limitations of the mind. This is the same thing we do when we work out. We work with the limitations not only of the body, but of the mind, of where we're at then. And how do we push that edge? How do we push that edge without pushing it too hard? Pushing it enough in the context of working out so that we can recover and have another workout in the same week, not just overwork. How can we be in harmony with ourselves? So this was a really great way to start off the container, is to get everybody wrestling. Boys being boys, wrestling in the mud or the dirt in this example. And there's a cadence that we did at this men's retreat of wrestling, movement, embodied activity, and then inner work, shadow work. Vern Petty is a counselor, and he led a lot of these exercises, such as dyads, in which are, in brevity, a conversation in which one person merely listens. In life, we often want to think about what we're going to say, or continue the conversation in some way, add something to it, react to that person. In a dyad, you're just pretty well looking with contentment, looking with ease, not being swayed in either one way or in another. You're not applauding, praising, or giving any reaction to the individual, just holding space, holding like a reflection so that they can see themselves. Then the other individual talks. They speak, on a question. The question is prompted by Vern in this case, and we can start slow. What do you love? What gives you purpose? These kinds of things. That individual has an opportunity to speak for several minutes, and then it switches over to the other partner. And there's another opportunity to go into things like, what are you ashamed of? Let's go into this shadow, and let's bring it to the light. Now, when you facilitate this kind of work, it's important to know that people will become triggered. They may become uncomfortable. They may open up an energy within them that may cause them discomfort or to move back into an old pattern, and they may begin to project onto another person or the facilitators. That's why it's important for the facilitators to have done a lot of work on themselves and to be trained in their respective region so that they can offer these services and help an individual into those places, and to not get stuck in those places, into those old stories, to help them to move the emotion, release the old story and limiting beliefs, and to come into their most empowered self. So you can understand how we can go into this darkness and do an action or activity like fighting where they have an opportunity to step into their empowerment, how this can create a big shift mentally, emotionally, and physiologically, Thrown in there, some of the things that I do. Aya Om, which is a mixed mind-body art system where I integrate Qigong, yoga, and breathwork practices, helping to open up and bring more awareness to the spinal canal and the many spinal centers, which are the coordination system of all the hormone and glands in the body, which help to change our consciousness and help us to use the breath to access the various layers of our body and being, to move energy in a very literal way through the body so it's not stuck, to bring more awareness to where we're holding tensions and stress. These tensions are the representation of belief structures and blocked emotion, as well as simply physical stress that is just held in the system. We're holding on to something. We're clenched in. We got a tight ass. We got something going on in the body. It all means something at the level of the physical and the metaphoric. The practices I guide get people out of their regular state of mind. I often integrate in there a lot of playfulness, maybe some laughter yoga, something to become serious, disciplined, devoted, and then to come into playfulness. Once again, it's a cadence that works. This is what the Qigong systems are about, as well as other systems of playing with yang and yin, movement into stillness, action into non-action, doing into being, meditation and exercise, and finding there is a way to be in meditation in exercise, and in exercise in meditation. This is when we can live the middle way, and we can be more dynamically flexible to show up in our life to any challenge, because these are self-cultivation practices. This is why I spend so much time practicing. I'm preparing myself. I'm tapping into my natural joy and equanimity. I'm learning emotional resistance. I'm learning to focus my mind so that when I'm in the world, I can show up as best as I can. This was a ceremonial container, meaning we take it a few steps further than psychological work. This isn't just inner work of the mind. This is an invitation to enter into a spiritual container. If you're unfamiliar with spiritual containers and what that means, there's rituals involved. There's a calling in of energies. This helps to set the tone. It helps to build that structure and call in an openness for healing. These rituals have been done for thousands of years by shamanic cultures, animist cultures, indigenous cultures. And yes, the sweat did feature a sweat lodge held by one of my elders, would be her son-in-law. And he came and offered the medicine that he carries through the sweat lodge ceremony. And he's the son-in-law of Vern Shanos, who was the elder who guided me in the way of sweat lodge, and who was the one who was pouring lodge on that property. It is now just Mumsy there, and she was happy to have us there, and she was there present herself. I was able to spend some beautiful time with her before the retreat and everyone arrived. She had picked some buffalo sage, and we were taking it apart, so we had some bundles made, and this was a really important time for me to listen to my elder. And I can be honest here, I made a mistake. She wanted to come see me in January, and I was away at a Vipassana, and I told her we could do it later, and I never messaged her back. I got really busy, and she wasn't happy, and I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think to message her back because I was really busy, and it's hard, can be hard for me to take a day off, and that was my responsibility. And when she communicated that to me, I had to really get honest with myself, and I began to see there was a deeper piece here about showing up and responsibility in the ways that I've been taught in the continued teachings of what it is to show up and be a ceremony holder and to respect my elders and to take care of them. And I see now that it's important that I go spend time with her. And that's what she wanted. And she shouldn't have to tell me again. And I think of when I have a future partner, it's this kind of relationship, I don't want to have to be told that I did something wrong. I should know a lot of the times. And that's what Mumsy told me. She told me, you should know what you had done wrong, because she told me I did something wrong before she told me what it was. I was being taught a lesson here. So these retreats are about learning, and though I was helping to facilitate, I don't think I've ever facilitated something and not learned a whole lot. And this is one of the beautiful things that comes when we all gather and learn together, is that when someone shares something, sometimes they're sharing it, of course, for themselves, but other people are hearing it and they're going, oh yeah, pornography, yeah, I've been there. Oh, shame, yeah, I've been abusive to a girlfriend. I didn't have a healthy relationship with my mom, dad, whatever it might be. And there's many people that heal when one person heals or is doing the healing or is receiving the healing, however you want to think of it. And that vulnerability of one and meet them there. And it's not in like a competitive way, but we can go deeper and deeper, and we can kind of piggyback off one another. And in a committed atmosphere like this, I humbly bowed to the men and how deep they went and what they were willing to share. It gives me a lot of faith in these men, which has been something that I've been working with in the last few years, of seeing and putting myself in a place where I feel I'm doing what I need to do to tend a lot of my own inner garden. And then the other piece is surrendering to those around me and co-creating with them in various capacities. And there's a few individuals there that I'm thinking about co-creating with in their entrepreneurship, as well as I'm co-creating with Expansive Man, the other facilitators in Vern, as well as I'm creating with Nurture, an online community that helps entrepreneurs with breathwork and many other stress management tools such as diet, exercise, branding, all the things. The time of the lone wolf is over, and in that there's a humility that has to happen. And I just spent 4 days at an ashram before this, and if you listen to that podcast, I went through a whole phase of learning to surrender to a guru of the tradition that I'm initiated into and bowing at his feet. And I took that same humility of learning to bow at somebody's feet, bow to the other men, and things come up. There's things that I'm aware of, even though I can move through them at a retreat like this, such as comparison. Men like to compare themselves to other men. It's quite habitual. It's quite subconscious. It's trying to understand where we are in the hierarchy. It's trying to understand where our strengths and weaknesses. There's good and bad ways of comparing. But if there's any negative self-judgment attached to that, then it doesn't become advantageous. Then we're just beating ourselves up. So it was really healing to see those self-judgments and see those comparisons and then offer love there and be able to uplift them, to share the things I was noticing about them, which initially had a charge, a trigger. And I could share that, and it was actually what I was finding beautiful about them. It was actually what I was seeing in them that I wasn't seeing in myself, and that's why it was triggering. And when I offered love there and I shared that with them, it brought more harmony to the relationship, and then we can co-create together and look, that same trigger is a strength they have that I don't have. And now that we're co-creating, we're stronger together. One of my gifts as being a reflector in the human design system is that I'm very good at mirroring people. I'm very good at being like a copy ninja, seeing how somebody moves or talks or does something and then amplifying that energy or mirroring those energies. So for me to spend a sufficient amount of time with someone, I learn a lot of the way that they think and move, and I can apply that strategy. I had a girlfriend ask me when I got back, what do the men need? What do men need right now? And when I thought on it, I was like, men need each other. They need to know their purpose, like their unique gifts, and a connection to their higher self, their soul, how to talk to God, whatever your languaging spiritual metaphoric is so that you have a connection with something greater than yourself. And they need to know that they're not alone in doing that, because really, how much you're going to accomplish alone? How much can you accomplish alone relative to how much can you group of men here to hold you accountable, to co-create with, to see you, or just in an ideal situation, do you want to go it alone? Why not have a group of good men to laugh with, to go to those depths with of sadness and sorrow and shame and what's holding you back, and then to pop off and tell fart and dick jokes and play with that cadence of let's meet each other on all these different levels. So what do the men need? They need each other in that resistance that we can give, that push and pull, those triggers. I think of how men, what's the word? They chirp at each other. These kind of squabble, and how therapeutic this can be, how healthy this can be. How comedic men can get together as like a pressure relief. And that push and pull, that competition allows us to grow. It's like going to the gym and never pushing yourself to an edge where you move against the resistance, where you push against the limitations of your body. You need somebody to push you. And it's best to push and be pushed to a point that's just beyond your threshold. This is the ideal place for growth. If it's too much, it's too much. You'll max out. You won't continue. It's beyond your capacity at this time. But if it's right on your edge, if the weight is, just a little bit more than you did in the last time, if your competitor is just a little bit better than you, or knows how to train you and how to push you to your edge, take you a little further, that's the ideal place of growth. And men need to be talked to about sex, sexuality, masturbation, how to treat women. And this was part of the retreat. Brian Carew led most of this. He led a beautiful 1.5 hour workshop, and we chatted a lot about it at several occasions, and I led a little bit of orgasm breathing, just another technique for them to have. In Brian Carew's beautiful workshop, he taught a lot of sexual kung fu, as taught by Mantak Chia and some of his other teachers, such as Will Blunderfield and other sources that he's gathered, and of course his personal practice. That's what I love about him and many of the other facilitators. They're embodied men working with many teachers, and also they have a dedicated practice, so they're embodied in their work, meaning they do enough practice that they live it. You can tell how the way that they move and walk, and when they teach, you can tell that they're not just reading things out of a textbook. There's practice there. And he shared a number of techniques, which he called the Core Four. These are energetic practices where we weren't naked masturbating, but you could move energy into your genital regions and teach. He was teaching us how to move it, circulate it up the spine, how to have multiple orgasms, or the big draw, which is a full body orgasm technique. And we had a larger conversation about masturbation, about right relationship, about pornography, about how to up-level the consciousness and the cultivation. Cultivation was an important word, and I use it quite a bit. Cultivation is what we do on our own to tend our own garden. We are cultivating ourselves as lovers every time we masturbate. We are cultivating the way we touch ourselves, and that's how we're going to touch others. If we are cultivating ourselves so desirously, so driven by the eyes and the mind in our love and in our sexual desire, we're going to use those same programs, or we're going to work against them when we're in a relationship. Jumping back to what do men need? Men need to be heard. And they need to be allowed to speak freely and not have the fear of judgment if they do need to cry, if they do need to break down. Because traditionally, and in many roles and in many circumstances, it's not appropriate. If you're going to war, if you're going in through an intense situation with your family, the male is often the one to hold it down. There's a reason to detach at times in life. But when that time is over, when that challenge is over, and you continue to suppress, it will lead to repression, and then we can get a panoply of negative things, blockages in the system that can lead to diseases, psychological disorders, emotional suppression leading to various different emotional imbalances, depressions, anxieties, PTSDs, etc. And when a man isn't able to express his emotions, he's not going to be able to express many things, like his truth, like his desires, like his wants. So in this retreat, which is a bit of an initiation, there's an activation that happens to put a man in his power, to open his throat chakra, to root him into his sex centers, to activate his solar plexus, his fire center. In the ceremonies, to connect him to the all. Because men need this higher level holistic connection. Because a man's purpose, which is only self-serving, is self-limiting. It is to throw seeds on the gravel, on the rocks, which is barren, they won't grow. When a man has love in his heart and his purpose is tied into his planet, his community, his family, and himself, that's where he can grow a garden that he can give to the world. And it comes from aligning one's purpose at that highest level, which acts as an organizing principle for the mind and behaviors. Otherwise, those older subconscious programs, which are more representative of animalistic desires or desires for sex, money, sense pleasure, will take over. The higher ordinate goals are the superordinate principle, which is at the top of the pyramid, which structures the higher level communication. Because we, as an individual, aren't meant to know it all. We're meant to surrender at the highest level and be in service of the all. There's nothing greater a man can do but offer his life. And that might be literal, depending on where you are, who you are, circumstance. But to offer your life is to offer your actions. Your life is your breath. It's to offer your life, which is your love. Every step you take, every breath you walk, when you live your prayer, you offer your life. And then if ever there is a time where your life is to be offered, your physical life, then you will do so with a smile on your face. This is something to aspire to. This is something that I aspire to. To be so surrendered into one's purpose that every moment we are dying, with each breath we are dying, and let us do so with grace, with ease, knowing that we are complete because we are always connected to the all, and this limited physical experience that we are having need not weigh us down when we lose this life, because we're connected to a purpose that is beyond this life, which is our eternal life. What do men need? Men need to be connected to these universal principles of the universal truths, that we are eternal. We are in a time of prophecy. We are conscious creators of our life. And we have the opportunity, as we always have, as we do in each moment, to make decisions, to switch to different timelines, to create the reality which is most preferable for us. And in this way, each individual is needed, as we are all co-creating this reality, to align and harmonize. And certain individuals, if they are not in alignment with those timelines and the vibrations, they will eventually move off into a different timeline, and down a long enough road, we won't even see them. We don't have to worry about that. Some of the men brought up, like, what do we do with the economy, and what do we do about this and that? And I reflected a truth from a teaching I got from Bashar, is just what I was speaking to now. It doesn't matter what they are doing. It matters what we are doing. Circumstances don't matter. Only state matters. Each moment we are shifting. Each blink you are opening into a new reality. It looks much the same because your belief structures and perceptions organize it as such, but it is not. We are shifting between new earth and new earth, new earth. Your whole body and being is different in each moment. Now, the choices you make can shift your life in radical ways. And the more that you shift into a reality that's preferable based on decisions that are sourced from a high vibration. So you are in a positive state making positive decisions. Because when you're in a negative state, you can only see so much because the limitations come from the density that you are operating from. It's filtering your perception. It's biasing the way that you see the world. So when we can take responsibility and radical acceptance for our state, we can lift our vibrations, such as in these containers, and see a greater capacity to align with a higher vision. And when enough individuals do this, we shift timelines so that what's happening in the economy in the old timeline isn't relevant. This is the wisdom of the East in many traditions, obviously as well found in the West, but in many Eastern traditions, as to go within. This is why a Buddhist monk can meditate and be doing their work, not needing to be out in the world to do their work. The work is inside. It's vibrational. And whether you become a monk or you're out doing service in the work world is up to you. It's what's bringing you the most excitement, which is most resonant for you, in that deeper listening and your connection to the all will help that. So we don't need to worry we don't need to worry, period, pardon me. We don't need to worry if it is part of your dharma, part of your highest calling, to be someone who is out speaking for the trees or rallying against whatever that might be. If that's part of your dharma and that feels well for you, then you'll be called to do that type of service. It's important not to do things out of fear. It's important not to do things because we should. So how does a man learn how to pray? And I don't mean anything religious. I mean prayer as in a communication with your own higher mind. You have your personal mind and you have a higher mind, and your higher mind is the all. You are one with the trees. You are one with everybody. There is something fundamental that is in you that connects you to all things. Learning to converse, have a conversation with these forces above and below, the trees, the rocks, the heavens above, the ones that swim, that crawl, all of these energies, our star family, our destiny written, the intelligence that is encoded within every being. There's a way to connect with this and communicate with this. And we had a few exercises that helped lead individuals to make sound mandalas, to connect with the earth in a good way. But prayer is open. Maybe it's song for you. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's the sweat lodge. Maybe it's a particular way of praying, which is ceremonial or within a certain context of a tradition. There's a communication there. And there's an act of surrendering one's current understanding of their mind in its current time-space limitation, and then listening, which is, for me, meditation. That's the inverse or the feminine form of prayer. External prayer, communication, external, speaking it. Internal, meditation, listening, turning within. When an individual learns to pray in the way that I know it, there's these two poles, and we get really good at listening and speaking. masculine and feminine. Ritual is important in this way. It was a really jam-packed retreat. It was a full retreat. Such good food. Care taken into the preparation of the food to feed 28 hungry men. Doing good work. And it was an honor. It was an honor to be a part of it. And to continue to stand beside Vern and to stand with the other men of Expansive Man as we continue to dream of what we can create in these spaces, in these containers, and how to continue to support men. How we can support each other outside of these containers and stay in contact and connection, grow our communities, grow our strength, and keep accountable to one another. This is why I'm filled with so much energy and strength to show up as best as I can for myself, so that next time I see my brothers, I can stand tall and I can share with them and look them in the eyes. So I can be trusted. I want to show to them my love. I want to serve them and bow at their feet like I bow at my guru's feet. Like I'll bow at my wife's feet. Like I'll bow at my children's feet as they ride me like a horsey. As I'll bow at Mumsy's feet, my elders and my parents, and my grandparents, and bow on the earth. A man is not weaker because he bows. He's stronger when he knows his true source of power. When we surrender to that higher intelligence, we will accomplish everything we need to. We will have everything that we need when we need it, which is my definition of abundance. And we can let go of any striving, like excessive striving for achievement. That's once again rooted in selfish desire or unmet needs of the heart. We can let that go and we can live in harmony, a more balanced life that's not so forced, not so striving. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying let's turn hippie. I'm using hippie in a negative context, though I don't entirely think hippies are negative. I mean, don't throw the pole shift all the way to the other side. I mean, sometimes surrender involves getting up early in the morning and working out really hard. That's surrender too. Surrender is one of the most beautiful virtues, and I connect with it often to best embody it, because no matter if you're surrendering to ecstasy or surrendering to sex and orgasm or surrendering to death or disease, you're surrendering into the sensation, you're surrendering into the experience. It's the same, either pole. So surrendering to one allows you to surrender to the other. And there's a kind of transcendence that happens when we surrender into something without resistance. Much of suffering is only our resistance to it, our internal resistance. It's not the actual stimulus that's there. It's not the actual problem, which is usually just at the level of our physical mind. So when we surrender to it, we disarm it, or release the charge within ourselves. Coming home, I feel ready. And my ask is, if this spoke to you, if it called to you, if you are intrigued by it, and you are a man and you would like to be connected, reach out. The time of the lone wolf is over. Now there's many organizations of men. Wherever you are, I'm sure there's one in your local region, as well as there are many powerful ones online. And if you are a woman and you know a man who could hear these words and benefit from it, I encourage you to share it along. My commitment is to myself first, my soul's path, to be continuously connected with my practices and my prayer. And my prayer involves my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, and her husband, my grandma, my other grandma, my aunties and my uncles, my nephews, my nieces, my cousins, my community, my ayahuasca community, this men's group, martial arts community, my yoga community, my qigong community, my ecstatic dance community, my breath community. So many communities. Those are the ones closest to my heart, but all communities. How can I continue to expand my circle of awareness so that I may be of greater benefit to the all? I know that's through connection, communities, networks, and connection to my earth. I thank you so much, Earth. Thank you for my family when the time is right, for my children, my children's children. Thank you for all the love that you provide. Aya Om, all my relations.